Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking. And I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is Sofia Smallstorm. Sofia is one of the top researchers in the alternative research community today. She is well known for her work on 9/11, which includes her documentary, 9/11 Mysteries. She has also researched the potential connections between chemtrails and synthetic biology, and sorting through the many questions surrounding the Newtown Sandy Hook shooting. Our discussion was wide-ranging as we talked about the intentional dismantling of our mind-body dynamic so the puppet masters can keep a lid on humanity and keep us from thriving. We pick up the conversation with Sofia as she is explaining the overall sense many of us are feeling that something is not quite right. And let's take a listen.
I think you would agree, Michael, that some of us feel the engineering and we're acutely aware of it. And I think others of us, meaning maybe I should say it the way I think it, the sheeple people, they have a dim sense that something is wrong. I don't know if they feel themselves or all of us being engineered as you and I might.
Well, I think what's happening, Sophia, what a lot of people are feeling, even those that are oblivious or maybe just on the fringe of really getting to understand that something is wrong, they're feeling the constant fatigue, the headaches, muscle pains, depression, anxiety. There's all kinds of physical manifestations that are taking place. And I think that people now are taking a step back and saying, this can't be the result of just nothing. Something has to be the catalyst. Something has to be contributing toward humanity and many of their friends and family feeling the exact same type of symptoms. And I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more and more people now trying to figure out, why do I have these ailments and why do I have these physical disorders that I'm dealing with?
Well, I think they are being told by, medical experts that they have a genetic predisposition for this. And because people are on average living longer, these predispositions are coming out faster, or more of them are coming out. But the fact is that this whole issue of genetics, as it relates to neurodegenerative disease and degenerative disease in general, is really not that significant. The fact is we are degenerating. Our bodies are falling apart. And the initial symptoms of that degeneration, those are attributed to, I know that in myself, I would say, oh, it's old age, it's stress, it's my hectic lifestyle. But this issue of stress is something new in the culture, I think. Because we live such artificial lives. We are so very disconnected from ourselves. We don't know who we are. We're constantly responding to stimuli instead of creating our path every day,
Right. Well, you talk about stress, and you're right on the money with that, because the way it's supposed to work, if you look at the animal kingdom, if an animal sees a situation where they have to react, their stress levels go up and they react. But as soon as they are out of danger, they go right back to being very calm, collected. What we have with humans, especially in our society, in our culture, stress switch never gets turned off. It's always on. So you always have this heightened feeling of being stressed or being anxious and so on.
Right. And I will say this. I did a little experiment the other day. I have a new Acousticom 2. It's an EMF sensor. I had another one or two that were a little less expensive. This one's not that much. It's about $250. But this one has lights that flash, and you can turn on the sound part of it. So I decided, I was driving home along one of my usual routes, and I thought, well, why don't I just put my EMF sensor on? I'll put the lights and the sound, and I'll prop it on my dashboard, and I'll just drive home. I had about 10 minutes left to go. And I saw that every quarter mile or so, the light would turn from green, which is safe, to red, and it would start flashing madly. And the sound that was coming from the meter would be like a box of rocks rattling. And it was clear to me that there are cell towers and cell antenna somewhere here, and I would be sometimes trapped at a red light when I was getting bombarded by electromagnetic frequencies, and I realized, gosh, this is why at this particular stoplight I get so mad. And
Yeah.
I thought in the past that, I hate being stuck at this light. I wish it would just turn green. It's because I'm getting bombarded with EMFs sitting at that light. That contributes to our stress. We are being so altered by man-made intrusions and assaults. Our natural form cannot handle it and doesn't like it. And so the adrenaline, the cortisol starts being manufactured, and we go into a state of almost like desperation, but we don't know what to do. We don't know where the danger is. So we have a lot of invisible dangers in our lives today that we cannot acclimate to.
Well, you're exactly right. What I've noticed, Sophia, is go down one of the main drags here. It's a main road going from where I live into the city of Raleigh. There's cell towers about, I don't know, every quarter mile to half mile.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is that, they weren't there a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, they're just popping up out of nowhere. And we're just swimming in a pool of EMF, just swimming in it. I mean, you're home, you have your Wi-Fi on, you've got your phone, you've got these cell towers, and it's just altering the entire environment. I mean, we are energetic beings. So it's interfering with our energy and our frequencies. And that you're right. That's why people are stressed out. They feel anxious. They have depression. A lot of it, in my view, you can attribute to what we're talking about here. It's the pool of EMF that we're plowing through on any given day.
Right. Well, you can do things to mitigate your own exposure. I do not have Wi-Fi. I do not use a cell phone. I use my landline and my hardwired phone. I have a couple of cordless 900 megahertz phones, which do not radiate from the base station. The new phones, I'm just telling this so listeners know, the new cordless phones that if you walked into Staples or Target or Office Depot, you could not buy a 900 megahertz phone. You will be buying what's called a DECT phone, D-E-C-T, it probably says on it, and it stands for Digital Enhanced Cordless Technology. And those phones are now 5 to 6 plus gigahertz, that's billion hertz. So here's where I want to make the point that the human body and natural systems are acclimated to what's called the Schumann resonances. Do you know what those are?
Yes, 7.83 hertz.
Yes, it's a bandwidth, you could call it, of 0 to 40 hertz, and these wavelengths are created by lightning strikes around the planet, and they peak between 30 and 40 hertz in certain very extreme conditions like massive equatorial thunderstorms. But overall, they run at 7 to 12 hertz, and this is what everything on the planet has attuned itself to. The minerals in your bones and tissues and the crystalline proteins in your DNA, the heart, the brain, our organs, they like 7 to 12 hertz. And they can't handle. Now, just think, the number 7 compared to the average cell phone, which is over 1 gigahertz. So that would be 1 billion hertz. And the DECT phones that I just spoke of are 5 billion cycles per second. And we have to remember that cycles per second are a force. That translates to a mechanical force on the cells, on the tissues. And these are, one person I know called them body-shattering harmonics. And they're invisible.
Yeah, they are invisible, and this is why people are completely unaware of it. They don't understand the science behind it. They're clueless.
Well, the government and the official agencies are relying on guidelines, and they're trumpeting that everything is safe, because their guidelines, not only were their studies done by the telecom industry, so what does that tell you? And you can say that to anybody in the public, the sheeple people, and they'll go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But they won't compute that means that the gadgets that are being sold are extremely unsafe, because those guidelines are millions of times higher than what they should be. And all the independent studies are coming up with guidelines that are millions of times lower than the official guidelines. So the people are being addicted to these very fun, convenient technologies.
Sophia, where do you think they're going with that? In other words, there's got to be a reason as to why humans are essentially expendable for the purposes of profit, but my sense is that it goes a little further than that. Why is it that they are pushing all this type of technology out there knowing that it's harmful to the human?
Because they're observing the responses. And I just did a newsletter on this, so I'm grabbing it. We're in a giant observation field, and we're all being observed. And we are all responding in our own way. Some people have a higher tolerance, some people have a lower tolerance. Where do those tolerances come from? They come partly from your makeup, your genetics, I guess, your genes. And they also come partly from what kinds of exposures you've had along the course of your life. If you've been vaccinated dozens of times, living in America, which is a country that vaccinates more than any other on the planet, and then you've got to sit with an iPad in school in your lap and be radiated as a small child, you're not going to grow up very hardy because your tissues have been experiencing all of these unnatural assaults and have had to try to adapt to them. And it's the adaptation response, I think, that's being studied overall.
The things you mentioned, since a child is born, I think it's something like 40 vaccinations by the time they're 6 years old.
70.
70, okay. And it's the fluoride in the water, it's the aspartame, it's the genetically modified foods, it's the aerosols they're spraying. It's just a constant, incessant bombardment. That's every single day. I was talking to, I had Dane on the show I mentioned to you earlier before we connected for this show, and I was explaining to Dane that here, where I live, they spray virtually every single day. And I know there's other areas of the country where they don't. I guess people count their blessings on those days, but here in North Carolina, in the Raleigh area, we don't get many days where they do not spray.
And so the day starts out blue and they spray, or it starts out with trails that morph into white haze?
On a typical day, we might wake up with blue skies, maybe a couple of aerosol trails here and there. By the time 8 o'clock rolls around, we're seeing lots of trails being laid, many of them in parallel, and 90% of the flights that I have observed originate in the south part of the state, and then these guys fan out in a northerly direction. By the time we get to around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we have this hazy, milky white sky with the sun just buried behind it. Very depressing.
It's opaque, the sky?
Yes.
And so what do people say? Do people say anything about the lines in the sky?
There are people who are aware of it, but I have to be honest, it's a little bit depressing. Many people don't even notice. They go about their day, they're doing whatever it is they're doing. I'm not picking on anybody. People have jobs and kids and so on and everything else they have to tend to. I mean, that's part of the Matrix's plan, is to make sure people are so inundated with things to do. They're on the hamster wheel 24/7 that they don't have time to notice and look at things. I mean, that's part of how this thing is all set up. A lot of people are just very, very oblivious.
May I make a suggestion? I came across an essay yesterday in a magazine I was reading, and it was an essay by a very well-known author who made the comment that when you see something that you've never seen before, let's start with something you have seen before. Like, let's say I look out the window and I see a tree, and my mind looks at that map that my neurons are creating, and it says, I know what that is. I've seen those before. They're called trees. And what you really do is you rifle through your database in your brain to come up with what connects with this. Honestly, when I first saw a chemtrail back in the 90s, I can't tell you what day it was, but I know that I saw them then, and I didn't know what they were. I just had no word for them. I saw them and I went, huh?
Right.
Well, that looks a little bit like a mare's tail cloud, but it's not that at all. And it looks a little bit like a vapor trail made by a plane, but it's far too big and thick and permanent looking, so it can't be that. So I had no word for it. And it was only many years later that somebody gave me the word. She said, chemtrails. They spray them all the time in LA. And this person lived in LA and I lived in San Diego, where we don't get that much spraying. I mean, this year we're starting to get more of these wispy looking chemtrail-y things, but they don't spray every day like that. We don't have white haze every day. And this is coastal San Diego where I live, and if they do spray here, you'll see the planes sometimes. They rarely make X's, but it all blows inland. And unfortunately, when you go inland, even 10 miles, it's a white world. It's like the white sky before a blizzard or something. I want to just get back to this notion of not having a vocabulary for it. And I wonder, I've been thinking about that. There are things that we don't have language for. And maybe that's what these people are experiencing. The people that you say are not putting two and two together. They probably would know if they were pressed and their life depended on it. They would probably say that those lines in the sky had to do with planes passing by. But they don't know anything beyond that.
Yeah, I think that that's a piece of it, but I do think there's a lot of people that are in denial. There's a lot of people that I have met, Sophia, that when I point them out, they want to debate with me. They don't want to accept the fact that they're being sprayed because it just completely crushes their paradigm, their belief system. The government would never do that. You're crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're a tinfoil hat wearer. And so you have a lot of that. So you have a lot of people that I just think are oblivious. They just don't know. They don't care. You have those that are very smart people, but they live in denial. It's a whole mix. But the good news is there was an article I posted up on my blog where billboards are going up now. And I think the first set went up April 21st, earlier this week in Atlanta. Gigantic billboards that say, God no longer controls the weather, get informed. And these billboards are showing the trails in the sky. I think that will do a lot to wake people up.
I know there's a campaign for that. I just got an email about it. The question is, do people look at billboards even? Do they? I guess they would, but I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is the responsive nature of the people has been changed.
Right, meaning that they're passive and unresponsive. Is that what you're saying?
Their instinct for self-preservation is vanishing. And I don't know what they're patterning themselves after, but they're not patterned based on individual directives. They're patterning after something else. And I notice this in colloquialisms. You know, people will say, for instance, my bad. Where did that come from? Suddenly everybody was saying it.
Yeah.
And it's not English. I don't know what it is. It's a very self-hurtful thing to say. It's like a baby saying, I'm bad. And that's really what it is. My bad, I'm. It's a very easy flip of two letters. Imagine if you had a baby and it was saying, I'm bad all day. You'd be worried. You'd say, no, you're not. I love you. You know, something like that.
Well, that's a result of the societal and the cultural indoctrination. That's what it is. It's programming. And so this programming is not just at a mental level. It's at the physical level. It's what we were referring to before. They're just changing the biology. They're changing the emotional states. And they're doing this with just a barrage of tools that they are throwing at the masses electronically with EMFs, as I mentioned before, the GMOs and the aspartame and the fluoride, and we can go on and on and on. And it's the indoctrination in the schools.
Yes, and let me mention, this is what I wrote my little monthly newsletter on, the zona reaction of eggs when they are fertilized. This is something I had to dig for, the term, but there is a guy whose blog I've been quoting a lot. His name is Joe Imbriano, and he does the FullertonInformer.com. And Joe was the one who told me a few weeks ago that the reason they brought wireless into the schools is to sterilize the kids. And I'm thinking, okay. And he explained it. And then I realized, you know, that he actually may be right, that there is a response upon the part of the egg once it's fertilized by a sperm where it hardens its exterior so that it can't experience further penetration. It doesn't want multiple genetics, you know, in the embryo. So genes, I keep saying genetics and genes interchangeably. But anyway, so this is called fast and slow block of polyspermy in biology. I think that's how you say it, Polyspermy. But in human beings, fast block is electrical and is in some species, but slow block is physical. It's a mechanical process. And in human beings, the cortical granules of the exterior of the egg fuse with the plasma membrane, and they create this very tough physical barrier so that there is no further penetration. And Joe told me that he believes that the rapid oscillations of EMFs, which are at billions of cycles per second, they are experienced by the eggs in little girls' ovaries. And women are born with 400,000 eggs that sit in their ovaries, and one is released every month after a certain point in time in their lives. And then that whole process closes down when the eggs get too old. So these eggs are being provoked into zonal reaction, meaning they're hardening themselves as these frequencies are hitting them. And they are getting hard to the point that the only way they'll ever be penetrated will be in a lab by a needle.
Well, it goes right along, Sophia, with the whole agenda for depopulation. I think some people have a hard time getting their heads wrapped around that, too, that there is actually a depopulation agenda by these ruling elites. And a lot of times I'll just point to the Georgia Guidestones as an example. I mean, somebody can scoff at that, too, but somebody had to build them. Somebody had to put them there, which is a mystery, which always amazes me that we don't really know how they got there. But it clearly states, commandment number 1 says, the population shall not exceed 500 million people. There's 7 billion people on the planet. That means 6.5 billion have to depart in order to achieve that objective. So what you're explaining here with sterilization, to me, I mean, that just goes right along with the program.
Right. And what are the Georgia Guidestones? It's like an Easter egg hunt. Yep. It's so much more fun if you give people the clues and you see how they're registering, finding out about themselves.
Right.
And the optimal situation would be to be creating the hive with the hive marching right along with it and saying, this is cool, just like people say when they get the newest Android.
Well, I think it's a big joke to the elites, to the globalists. They put it out there, they hide in plain sight, and they put it out, and they laugh. They look at the masses and they say, they are truly, truly asleep. Because, I mean, I can put these things up. I can put this gigantic Stonehenge-like monument called the Georgia Guidestones up. I can put down our 10 Commandments, and they're there for everybody to read, but nobody cares. So everything is just done in plain sight. And I think that they have deducted that the masses are far more asleep probably than they even imagined. And the reason why I say that is because the rate and pace of what they're implementing these days is picking up. Whereas before, they had to kind of do things in a very covert way. They had to kind of couch what it is they were doing, and they had to hide. And today, I'm not seeing it anymore. What I'm seeing them do now is, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. And they realize that there is a small pocket of folks that are awake, and they will react to it. But I think in their minds, they're thinking, we can deal with that. As long as 95% of the population is walking around oblivious and asleep, no problem. Put the pedal to the metal and let's go. And that's my assessment of what I'm seeing happening today.
Right. I would put it as an abdication of personal power. That keeps getting greater from generation to generation. And even within the generations, people start giving up their personal power as their life progresses. And that is the making of the hive. When, I've been watching, I don't watch much TV, but I'm looking at some older programs, the Andy Griffith Show. And do you remember the little boy Opie?
Yes.
Well, Opie, not only was he adorable, it's hard for me to believe that that's Ron Howard as a kid. But anyway, Opie, he is self-motivated in ways that I don't think children are today. And he's in a film, for crying out loud. He's not being a real boy in real life. He has a script. But Opie runs off and does things that kids today don't do. I mean, all these, I think the razor blades and the apples at Halloween and all the dangers that are lurking out there that parents want to protect their kids from. Kids don't run around freely anymore. We used to leave the house when we were 7 or 8 on our bikes, and we wouldn't come back till dark. And our parents had no idea where we were. And we would go places that would scare us.
Right.
We just cycle around on these main roads, and sometimes we'd go on foot, my brother and I and some of our friends, and oh my gosh, we would do stuff. We would light fires in the very back of the property and roast potatoes that we stole from the kitchen and, things like this that I don't think kids even do today. Or if they do, they're considered very bad for doing it. And I don't think they even want to do stuff like this.
Well, that's because it's an engineered society. It was very different when you and I were growing up. And over the last 60 years or so, it has really, really taken a turn for the worse. I mean, just take a look at as you're speaking about when we were kids, I remember the police. My father was a cop. And, they were local police. They walked a beat. They were public servants. But today, we don't have police. We have militarized aggression.
Yeah.
They don't blink at tasing people, beating people, shooting dogs. They like to shoot dogs, it appears, these days, for any old reason. So, I'm just using that as an example. I know there's a lot of very good people in law enforcement, so I don't want anybody to mistake my comment for making a blanket statement. But look, it is what it is. All you have to do is just pay attention to it, and you can see that things are going south, and they're going south very quickly.
Well, I think what's also being formed in our minds is a fear of the police. I have met some detectives and police. We have sheriffs here locally who are really great. They're real people. I can talk to them like a real person. But on TV and these things you see on the internet where, yes, they're all dressed in black and they've got all these like gas masks on and they're shooting dogs, I think that is being done so we will immediately feel divided from those who are there to protect us. And we're being shown that the police are bad and we have to stay away from them because they might do this to us. So all these divisions are being made in the society, and it's all marketing. It's so difficult to figure out, okay, what should I think? Who should I be? Because the stimuli that are coming at you are very, very confusing. In their totality, they're very confusing, and individual stimuli are also very confusing.
It's about obeying. Obey authority. And you're right, it is marketing. They are putting it out there. And as I mentioned before, all police departments aren't like this, but they put enough of it out there to engulf the masses in the mentality that you better obey, because if you don't obey authority, something very bad could happen. And that's why they're even putting this out there. Cops are showing up for, let's say, a domestic dispute or something really minor in most cases, and some violent act takes place. So what they're communicating is it doesn't have to be a big thing for violence to occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the post-human society. They are shrinking us in our being. We are being shrunk every single day into a smaller and smaller and smaller vestige of what we once might have been. That's what I'm experiencing. And then the separation among people also. The fact that maybe teenagers do this. I see them on the beach. I go to a beach frequented by teenagers right now. I keep moving from beach to beach just to change the scenery. And they do hang out together. But we used to spend entire days as teenagers hanging out, going to places where we would just, the airport to watch the planes take off, things like that. I don't know if kids do that now, but certainly adults, they have no time to dawdle around. And if they're dawdling, they're doing it in front of the programming machine,
Right.
the TV. So that to me is sad. There's no real leisure time, and it's crowded with impulses. I see parents at the YMCA, and they're supposed to be there for their kids' swim lesson, and they're not looking at their children at all. They're looking at their phones. So they're not in the present world. And that's, I think, another aspect of this. We're being removed from our present life, and we're living a virtual life through some gadget that is controlled by frequencies. And those frequencies are being implemented into our biology, yet we don't know it because we can't see it, but we can feel it, but we don't know what the feeling is. We don't know where it originates from or what it translates to. Imagine holding an Android and looking at some text you've gotten from somebody that says, I can't meet you for dinner. And you are receiving this bombardment of EMFs, and you get stressed from that, and you get stressed from the message a little bit because you were looking forward to it, or this is the fourth time this person has canceled on you or something. And all of that mixes together in your body, and then you are now overreacting. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
We are being overstimulated, over-triggered, and we're making associations in the depths of our neurological connections that aren't correct because we don't know how to separate what's happening to us.
And to kind of tag on to that, Sophia, as you were talking about people getting their messages on the phone or parents looking at their phones when they're at a school function or in a restaurant. I like that when I go to a restaurant. I see a family sitting there and everybody, including the kids, is looking down at their phone. Nobody's talking to each other.
I know.
There's no family discussion going on. Everybody's looking at their phones. But, the puppet masters have designed this. They are engineering society and the culture by stealth. Everybody thinks there's going to be some kind of grand event, but I doubt that. I think they're doing just fine going about it by stealth. So you have two family incomes. When I was growing up, my father worked, my mom stayed at home. So you always had a parental influence at home. But they took that away. They took that away by forcing the situation where two parents had to work in order to maintain a household and to take care of their kids and do the things that my parents did with my father just working. Then they take the child away because you need two incomes in order to survive. The kids wind up being taken away. They go to childcare. So this way, the parental influence is taken out of the equation. The state begins its indoctrination by the time the kid is 5 or 6 years old in many situations. And that's why, to a large degree, we have what we have today. When people look at society and scratch their heads and say, how did it get so dysfunctional? Well, that's one way. Kids have been taken out of the equation. The parents have been taken out of the role of teaching responsibility and accountability and right and wrong, and it's all been pushed into the state. The state now controls your child in most situations.
And as parents become aware of the gross indoctrination that their children are receiving at school, and some parents are becoming aware of it, now there's the option of homeschooling, but that will be obliterated at some point. In Sweden, you cannot homeschool, and Sweden is a socialist state that's more progressive than we are and always has been. So you could look to Sweden to figure out what might happen here. So let's say you can't homeschool in the future, and you don't want to put your kids in the school system. And even today, if you homeschooled, then it means somebody has to teach the kids, so you can't both work, or you have to hire somebody else to homeschool your kids. So that means more money that you probably don't have. So what is the easiest conclusion to come to? It's, well, why have kids?
Right.
It's just too complicated. And if I don't have kids, then I'm not hurting anybody by taking them out of school or making my, wife stay home and homeschool, or my husband or whatever. It's so much simpler just to say, okay, I'll just be by myself and I'll be free.
Right. I can't afford to have a family, so I won't do it.
Right, and there you are. There's the Depop.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly what's going on.
And you're doing it willingly. And people will just argue with you, well, I have to make the right choice given my current circumstances and the circumstances offered to me by the world. I'm making the smartest choice. I'm not hurting anyone.
Well, that's because, Sophia, we live in a system of commerce. And in a system of commerce, you constantly have to run around 24/7, get on a hamster wheel, and chase paper. You've got to have money. Because if you don't have enough money to pay your rent, you go homeless. If you don't have enough money to buy food, you'll starve. If you don't have enough money to be able to get medical care, you'll get very sick or perhaps you'll die. This is how twisted the system is. And I just wish more people would take a step back and assess it from that level. But they don't. What they do is they just dive right into it and they play right into the game.
Yeah. They don't like me talking to you. They're sending a black helicopter over my house. Can you hear it?
Just wave to them.
No.
I can hear it, yes.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I always tell people if I wind up in a FEMA camp, I will be in good company.
Well, let me just tell you this about the FEMA camps, all right? This is my idea. The FEMA camps are going to be set up as community centers. Because once the assault gets too dreadful for most people to bear, we'll be encouraged to move out of our houses because of mudslides or earthquakes or floods or whatever. The property, this area is a condemned area, people. Look what happened last year. You can't live here. It might happen again. And the economy will be shot. People won't be able to have jobs and they'll be freaking out. They'll be in horrible debt. The camps will be offered to us as places to seek refuge at the generosity of the state. And you'll be told, just come to our camps. We'll give you 3 meals a day. We'll vaccinate you and take care of you health-wise and prevent you from getting plagues and all these diseases. And we'll put sandbags up against the storms and the floods, and you'll all be together. and you can bang out some license plates for us, we'll give you a job. And your kids will be there, and we'll have to separate the adults from the kids because it'll be much easier that way, but you can see your kids every day for a few hours and play with them. We'll school the kids, and the people will go, oh, thank you. This is great. I don't have to worry about anything.
They'll have FEMA daycares. I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be laughing, but that is where it's going. And yeah. I just wish more people would wake up and figure it out.
But maybe if they figure it out, they're counting on the sheeple people liking it. They'll go, God, can't we have that now? There was a guy, I read about him. It was a little blurb in Harper's Magazine. And he was in his 60s, and he went and robbed a store. And he was tried, and the judge said something to him and asked him why he did it. He said, you know why I did it, Judge? Because I'm too young to receive Social Security. I'm not able to keep myself alive and meet my needs. I have no money. And I just wanted to be put somewhere for a couple of years where I would get my meals and I would have a roof over my head. And so I committed a crime. I want to go to jail.
Well, that's exactly why a lot of guys join the military.
Well, they're young. They're looking at it as an opportunity, and they have been marketed to that it will be an opportunity, and they do not know what's going to happen to them there. I mean, there was a young kid who joined the Air Force because his brother did, and I don't believe he was officer material like his brother, and he had to get a release. He had to act insane, he told me, and he cried and cried and cried nonstop for several days. And they put him in a little, room, and all the psychiatrists came, and he just acted and sounded as crazy as he could. And they let him go. They said, you're not fit to be here, there's something wrong with you. And he told me, he said, they vaccinated me 20 times in 1 month. He said, what do you think they did to me? I said, I don't know. He said, I've never been vaccinated in my life.
20 times in 1 month?
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
He said that or something like that, very short. He wasn't there very long. Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounded to me like it was in a very short period of time.
Well, 20 times at any time period is
yeah. He was not there longer than 3 months.
Okay.
Max. So I don't know when the vaccinations came. And then he said when they ate, they used to sit down to eat, and the officers would stand in back of them and scream. And one of the things that they were told to scream while they ate, they had to scream at the top of their lungs, I dine in hell! I dine in hell! And the officers were yelling all these obscenities and, just stressing them out while they ate. And they had to scream that they were dining in hell. And this is training.
That's the fear-based training, and it is to desensitize the person. It's to desensitize them. There's so much desensitizing going on in society in general. I mean, just think about what kids are watching on TV with all the blood, killing, the video games, very violent video games, desensitizing them to life, so that when something happens, if somebody gets hurt or a dog gets shot or a person gets injured, they have no compassion. There's no empathy. They're just hollowed out.
Well, yeah. I mean, factually speaking, they're probably rifling through their neurological index, and they're realizing how many times they saw that on TV, and that it doesn't matter because they were removed from it, because they are removed from what's happening on the television physically, and therefore they can be physically removed from this thing too. This is the new form of human being, new form that's making itself, it is invasion of the body snatchers. We've been body snatched.
It's very, very creepy. And when you talk to some folks about this, they don't see it because they're so indoctrinated and they're so embedded in the matrix that this is their reality. This is normal. This is how it works. What else are you going to do? I mean, these are the responses I get back when I talk to folks about what I believe is going on. A lot of people shrug their shoulders.
Well, you care, Michael. And there are people who care, and we will bother to say things to other people. But are you familiar with that practice they have at Bohemian Grove, the cremation of care, that ceremony?
Yep.
So that's another thing. They are doing that to us. They have cremated care. Cremation is what you do after something dies. So we have to think of the words that are used in that phrase, cremation of care. Care is already dead. They are simply reducing it to ashes now.
We spoke a little bit about Mark Passio's work. I think Mark covers that in his lecture. It's about 8 hours long, but it's well worth it. His lecture on natural law, he talks about cremation of care. It was very, very interesting.
Well, I am going to plumb Mark Passio's work now because this is new for me. He makes a lot of sense to me as well. I want to hear everything he has to say. This is the whole thing. You and I listen to other people, and presumably somebody's listening to this show or will be, and we're making our own encyclopedia of values, of information. It's like a code book. And I wonder what's in the rest of the world's code books, I sigh because I don't know that they have this kind of body of material to go through in order to make something for their code book that will help them. People are sweeping like lemmings into the abyss, and they don't see it.
Even if they have access in order to build their code book, Sophia, the problem is that there is so much disinformation out there. For every bit of truth, there's 2 tons of garbage.
Yes.
And you have to weed through it. It takes time to get acclimated, and it takes time for you to become aware of who you can trust and who you cannot trust. And I was explaining this to someone on another show. The problem, though, is as we're plowing through all this junk to get to an ounce of truth, they've already progressed the agenda 5 years. And it's intentionally done this way. That's why there's such a bombardment of stuff out there. Some of us have gotten pretty good at, cutting through it, but for the rest of humanity who's just getting started, it takes a long time to figure out what this agenda is about and what is going on. And that's how it's set up. It's set up so that they can continue to do their business, go about implementing their agenda, essentially uninhibited in many ways.
That's because we stay willingly in the 3rd dimension. And again, I don't know too much about metaphysics compared to some people, but I believe they are operating from another dimension, which is why they've sewn up the present, which is why they've got this trajectory so effectively mapped out, and we're just all walking along in step. If we could wake up to our own ability to be interdimensional, then we would have a little bit of advantage that we don't have now. But we are too busy staying in response mode instead of intention mode. I was struck one night very recently with the realization that if we could just take any fear that we have, pick one, anyone, take it away just as a mental exercise and replace it with an intention, then we might operate differently. And these are things we can actually do in our present lives. We can take a fear and replace it with an intention and remake ourselves.
Well, you're absolutely right. Our thoughts create our reality. I tell people that all the time. And you're also absolutely right when you talk about puppet masters or the Matrix, whatever you want to call them. They do not operate in a 3rd dimension capacity. They understand mysticism. They understand the tenets of the mystery religions. And what they do is they manipulate consciousness. And they do that by manipulating energy. So if you take 9/11 as an example, the September 11th event was a massive manipulation of consciousness. They know how to steer consciousness. They know how to take it from point A and move it to point B or point C. They know how to do that. They know how consciousness works, whereas most people haven't a clue. Most people have been given institutionalized religion, which is man-made mumbo-jumbo to keep them essentially in a box. They don't operate in a box. They do not. And so that's what they do. They manipulate consciousness through these events.
The greatest assault on us has been the theft of our consciousness.
That's exactly right. They have stolen consciousness because they have taken the knowledge and the wisdom away. People talk about the Dark Ages, Sophia, in the past. I'm like, excuse me. We are in the Dark Ages right now. People think, oh, we live in the information age. Information is not knowledge. Information is not wisdom. It's just information. And you have to vet that information in order to get to the knowledge and then implement it as wisdom. And that's what many, many people do not understand.
Yeah, and it takes a desire on the part of the individual to do that. You have to want to do that. You have to be drawn in to something, to your own life and your own self. You have to be invested in that. And I think that people have been stuck on what I call the rack of contingencies. That was a phrase taught to me by a psychologist, where, for instance, you go to school to get good grades. You get good grades to get into a good college. You get into a good college so you can get a good job. You get a good job so that you can have a nice house and marry a nice woman and have children and bring them up right and buy them enough things. And so this is what motivates us, this rack of contingencies. Everything is for the acquisition of something else. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, ourselves are lost in this process. They're consumed by it.
That's because we are vehicles. We are vehicles in which they can extract revenue from. So they put people on the debt machine, and many people have fallen prey to the debt machine. And what you were just explaining, the house, the car, the kids going to school, keeping up with the Joneses, belonging to a golf club, a wine club, or whatever it is, have to have a BMW, have to have this car. All that stuff is put out there so that it keeps people locked down. And they don't even realize they're locked down. They don't even realize that they're being overcome and bolted to the ground because of debt primarily. And they're distracted, and there's paralysis, and they do not have peripheral vision, and they do not see clearly. They do not think clearly. There's no critical thinking. There's no free thinking because of this.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's how it is. And how can it be changed? I think the best way we can change it is to model it ourselves. We have to break from it. We have to try to explore how big we really are. And we are big. We are big in our scope of possibilities. And we have to start experimenting in our lives with those possibilities. We have to do it in real time.
Well, and there is an awakening taking place. So I don't want people who are listening to me thinking, boy, that guy is really down on this stuff. I'm not down on it. You have to express the realities of what's going on. There are some very serious implications with regard to what they're implementing, and you have to discuss it. You have to talk about it. It serves no purpose to basically hide and just pretend that it doesn't exist, but there is an awakening, and more people are getting on board. I mean, just the fact that I'm doing this radio show, I know you have your radio show, you do your research and your documentaries, and there are many others out there doing it. It is growing, but we have to pick up the rate and pace. We do, because, I mean, they're going full steam ahead, and we're at a disadvantage because we got started a little late, understanding and realizing what this is all about. But we can get there. We just have to put our heads down and just plow ahead.
Yeah, that's why I joined the Pure Momentum Network, because of the name, Pure Momentum. We need momentum now. And that is a new internet podcast hub, puremomentum.net. And I would ask everyone to listen to Pamela's shows, Pamela Tartar. She does solo shows in which she unfolds a really amazing philosophy that makes all kinds of sense to me, Michael. So her shows are going to be up there, on a regular basis, and you can hear the first hour free or subscribe for the second. And you can hear my shows too. We need this momentum, exactly what you said.
Sofia, aside from the radio show, how else can folks get familiar with your research and other endeavors you've undertaken?
Well, I have my website, aboutthesky.com, which focuses mainly on chemtrails, but I'm putting up my newsletter. So there's a newsletter tab on About the Sky, not About This Guy. Somebody thought I'm writing about relationships. Aboutthesky.com, newsletter tab, and the Pure Momentum tab is there as well, the radio network. I have a store, Avatar Products, Avatar just like the James Cameron movie, products.com, and I sell all kinds of really cool stuff there that has solved major problems for me. I would recommend iodine, magnesium cream. Those are two minerals that we're very deficient in. They're the most important minerals that our body needs. And also the cell phone shielding bags, the bed warmers for hard times in the winter, staying warm at night. Some of these things I've created myself. I believe we are in survival mode now, and we need to share tips on how to get through that and how to come together in the collective effort to survive, because the state is not going to take care of us. The state is just going to keep changing us and keep devolving us and get us farther and farther away from our true selves, our true nature. And that's something that we want to hang on to. We want to be ourselves.
Yeah, the state has no interest in humanity.
Right.
Zero.
Or individual. They are stripping us of our individuality. They are making the hive. And parents love their children because their children are all individuals. People say this about their pets. Oh, he's such a character, my dog. So we appreciate, as a species, individuality. It's what makes us remember each other. It's what makes us, when we look at each other and we haven't seen this person in years, we say, you look familiar. And we still don't know who it is, but it has registered. And that's important.
It's very important. The individuality aspect of it, you're 100% right. People have lost that, and we've got to get it back. We have to reclaim who we really are. Now, Sophia, we're pushing up against the hour. Did you have any final words, anything that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I could talk forever, but there's no point if we're up against the hour. So I'll just have to come back another time.
I want you to come back. This has been great. There's just so much to talk about, and it's always great talking to somebody that you can actually have this type of conversation with. So
Yeah.
would you be willing to come back?
Of course, because you know why? Because you said at least 10 times that I'm absolutely right or I'm exactly right.
You are.
I know I'm not all the time, but it's still nice to hear that. You know what that is? That is affirmation. And we give affirmation to one another. We enhance one another's lives. We're saying, you know what? It's important that you were born.
And I mentioned that in one of the emails, right? That's the day you came in to help change the
Right.
planet.
Make the world a better place. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. Very, very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that concludes my discussion with Sophia Smallstorm. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we will have Sophia back on the show in the very near future. As always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and for visiting the blog, sageofquay.com, and please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, which you can do by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, to live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.